My boyfriend's obsession went so far that he wanted to legally take my ex's name. Walking away was only the beginning of my nightmare. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and until last Tuesday, I thought my life was finally on track. My boyfriend and I had been together for 18 months and living together for 6. We split the bills, spent holidays with each other's families, and argued about nothing more serious than groceries or what to watch after dinner. It was the kind of relationship that felt stable enough to stop questioning. Looking back, nothing about that evening seemed unusual until Ethan opened his mouth. We were eating leftover Chinese food while a cooking show played in the background when Ethan suddenly looked up and said, "So, I've been thinking about changing my name." I looked up from my dinner, expecting him to say something ordinary. "Really? To what?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He spun his fork between his fingers, then said it almost casually. "Danielle." I nodded without thinking. It sounded random, but people changed their names for all kinds of reasons. Then it hit me. Daniel Matthews, my ex-boyfriend. I stared at him, waiting for the grin that would tell me he was joking. It never came. "You mean Daniel Matthews?" I asked. "Yeah," he smiled. "I've actually grown to like it." Every sound around me seemed to disappear. "You want to legally change your name to my ex-boyfriend's? It's just a name." "No," I said, unable to hide the disbelief in my voice. "It's the name of the man I spent 3 years with." He shrugged as though that detail meant nothing. "Names don't belong to people." "They don't," I admitted. "But you didn't discover this one by accident." Unhesitated, just long enough to confirm what I already suspected. "I first heard it when you talked about him." There it was. The answer I hadn't wanted. "So the idea came from my ex." "I just liked the name." I searched his face, hoping he would explain what I was missing. "Out of every name in the world, you chose his. Can you honestly tell me you don't see why that feels disturbing?" Instead of answering, he frowned. "You're turning this into something weird." I couldn't help laughing, though there wasn't any humor left in me. "I'm turning it into something weird? Ethan, you're asking me to accept that my boyfriend wants the exact same name as the man I used to love. He doesn't own it." "No, but if I announced tomorrow that I wanted to legally change my name to Olivia, your ex-girlfriend's name, would you sit there acting like it was completely normal?" His confidence slipped for the first time. "That's different." "Why?" "It just is." That was the moment I stopped wondering whether he was joking. He genuinely believed nothing about this was strange. "How long have you been thinking about this?" "A while. And you've already looked into it, haven't you?" I gave a small nod. The more I thought about it, the more it felt right. A cold feeling settled in my chest. I wasn't asking for my opinion. He was asking for my approval. "I thought you'd support me," he said. I looked at him for a long moment before quietly answering. "You're asking me to pretend this is normal. I can't." His expression hardened. "So now you're trying to control my life?" "No," I said, standing up. "I'm deciding what I can live with." Watch me grab my keys, confusion slowly giving way to frustration. "You're seriously leaving over a name?" I met his eyes one last time. "No, I'm leaving because the man I love shouldn't have to be told why this crosses a line." While he kept talking behind me, I packed a small bag without answering. As the apartment door closed behind me, one thought refused to leave my mind. I couldn't reconcile the man I'd just left with the one I'd fallen in love with. Melissa worked as a paralegal, and after years of handling housing disputes, she understood exactly how messy breakups could become. "I need some advice," I said. "What happened?" "Ethan and I broke up." A long silence followed. "I thought you two were doing great." "So did I." I gave her the condensed version, leaving out the emotional details and sticking to the facts. When I finished, she didn't comment on the relationship. She went straight to the problem that actually mattered. "What about the apartment?" "We're both on the lease." "You can't just disappear," she said. "Either one of you takes over the lease, you both agree to end it early, or you're both financially responsible until it expires." 4 months. She nodded. "Then don't make any decisions verbally. Document everything from this point forward." Those 2 words stayed with me. Document everything. The following evening, I met Ethan at a coffee shop near his office. The moment I saw him, I knew we'd walked into 2 completely different meetings. I came dressed like we were on a date. Fresh haircut, the watch I'd bought him for his birthday, even the cologne I used to love. He smiled the second I sat down. "I knew you'd come." I said I would. The waitress arrived, and before I could order, Ethan asked for my usual vanilla latte. "I'll have a black coffee instead," I said. His smile faded. "I've missed you. I'm here to talk about the apartment." "That's all?" "Yes." He studied me for a moment before asking quietly, "So this is still about the name?" "No," I replied. "It's about the fact that you expected me to accept something that crossed every boundary I had. I just wanted a different name." "You wanted my ex-boyfriend's name." It's a coincidence. No, it isn't. You admitted that's where you first heard it. He shook his head with obvious frustration. There you go again, making everything about your ex. I sighed. No, Ethan, I'm making it about respect. You just can't accept my choices. And you refuse to understand why they hurt me. He called me insecure. I told him he wasn't listening. Within minutes, we were having the exact same argument we'd had in the apartment, only now neither of us was trying to change the other's mind. When the coffees arrived untouched between us, I pulled an envelope from my bag and slid our lease across the table. I spoke to someone about our options. You already got legal advice? I got practical advice. I pointed to the paperwork. There are only two realistic solutions. You keep the apartment, and I'll continue paying my share until the lease ends. Or we both agree to terminate the lease early and split the penalties. Han never even looked at the papers. What about fixing us? I slowly shook my head. There isn't an us anymore. He stared at me for several seconds before saying quietly, You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Maybe, I replied as I stood, but staying would be a bigger one. I left him sitting there without touching his coffee. Halfway back to my hotel, my phone rang. It was our landlord. Ethan asked if he could add another tenant to the lease, he said. I wanted to check with you before approving anything. I stopped walking. We agreed yesterday that I'd keep paying my share. I know, that's why I called. He can't add anyone unless every tenant agrees in writing. Thank you for checking. After we hung up, I stood on the sidewalk staring at my phone. Less than 24 hours earlier, Ethan had insisted he wanted another chance. Now he was already trying to change the lease. Either Ethan had lied to my face in that coffee shop or he'd already moved on before our relationship was truly over. Neither possibility made me feel any better. About an hour later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Hi Claire, this is awkward, but I think you deserve to know what Ethan has been telling people about you. I hesitated for a second before calling. A nervous woman answered. Claire? Yes. I'm sorry for contacting you like this. I'm not even sure I should be involved. I stepped into the quiet hotel hallway. Who is this? My name's Sophie. I work with Ethan. I remembered her immediately. We'd briefly met at his company's holiday party a few months earlier. What happened? She took a deep breath. I think Ethan lied to me. My grip tightened around the phone. What did he say? We've been seeing each other since Monday. The words hurt less than I expected. After everything that had happened, they almost felt inevitable. He told me you refused to move out, that you'd had an emotional breakdown, and that you were obsessed with your ex. According to him, you controlled his money, checked his phone, isolated him from everyone, and eventually became unpredictable. He said leaving you was the hardest decision he'd ever made. The words caught in my throat. She was describing someone I didn't recognize. Finally, I asked, do I honestly sound like that to you? No. The answer came without hesitation. So why are you calling? I thought he was moving far too fast, but after hearing your side, I realized that wasn't the only problem. Because yesterday, he asked me to move in. I stopped breathing for a second. We've only been seeing each other for 3 days, she continued. Then he told me you'd abandoned the apartment and stopped paying rent. I never did. I know. You know? I checked. She admitted she'd looked through my public social media after Ethan's story started falling apart. You never attacked him online. You never sounded unstable. You only said your relationship ended because of one incredibly strange decision. I leaned against the wall. I wish that were the whole story. Then tell me. I told her everything, from the dinner conversation and the name Daniel to the argument, the hotel, and the lease. When I finished, the line stayed quiet for several seconds. I'd seriously wanted to legally change his name to your ex-boyfriend's? She finally asked. Yes. And he couldn't understand why that upset you? No. She let out a long breath. I honestly thought there had to be some misunderstanding. So did I. There wasn't. Another silence settled between us before she quietly admitted. I ended things this morning. What made you decide that? I told him none of this felt normal. He called me judgmental and said you'd poisoned me against him. That sounded painfully familiar. I'm sorry, she said. You don't owe me an apology. I believed him at first. I really thought he was the victim. Most people probably would have. Before hanging up, she said something I couldn't stop thinking about. I don't think he's trying to fix the breakup anymore. I think he's obsessed with proving he's right. Those words stayed with me for days. 2 mornings later, my sister Emily called. The moment I heard her voice, I knew Ethan had already found her. He sent me a Facebook message, she said. He claims you're having some kind of emotional breakdown, that you're obsessed with Daniel, paranoid, and pushing everyone away. He even suggested the family stage an intervention. I couldn't help laughing, though there wasn't any humor in it. You didn't believe him? No, I've known you your entire life. I wanted to hear your side first. Some of the tension I'd been carrying finally eased. I explained everything from the beginning. By the time I finished, Emily sounded horrified. Claire, that's not just strange. It's disturbing. I know. He's not contacting this family again. She blocked him before we even ended the call, then reminded me to save every message in case he tried reaching out again. Unfortunately, Ethan wasn't done. Over the following week, he contacted several of my closest friends, telling each of them a slightly different version of the same story. In every version, I was unstable, controlling, or still obsessed with Daniel. Most of my friends saw through it immediately. Mia called to check on me. Rachel laughed because the accusations sounded nothing like the woman she'd known for years. Not everyone questioned him, though. One acquaintance messaged me, saying she hoped I got the help I needed and accusing me of harassing Ethan after the breakup. I started typing a long explanation, then deleted it. Instead, I sent one sentence. I left because my boyfriend wanted to legally change his name to my ex-boyfriend's and couldn't understand why that crossed a boundary. That's the whole story. Believe whatever you want after that. I never heard back. Maybe that person believed Ethan. Maybe they didn't. Either way, I was done trying to defend myself. The people who mattered already knew who I was. That was enough. 3 days later, my landlord called. Ethan asked me to remove you from the lease, he said. He claimed you'd already agreed. I absolutely didn't. I figured as much. His tone grew more serious. I've managed rental properties for over 20 years, and I've seen plenty of ugly breakups. This one feels different. Keep every text, email, and voicemail. If this gets worse, you'll want a complete record. After we hung up, I created a folder on my laptop and started saving everything. Screenshots, emails, voicemails, call logs, anything connected to Ethan. At the time, I hoped I'd never have to use any of it. The next morning, an email from Human Resources appeared in my inbox. Please stop by HR at 10:00 a.m. regarding a concern that has recently been brought to our attention. I hadn't done anything wrong, but somehow I already knew who had filed that complaint. At 10 o'clock sharp, I walked into Linda's office. She greeted me politely before getting straight to the point. We received an anonymous complaint yesterday. It claims you've become emotionally unstable at work and have made comments suggesting violent behavior. The accusations were so ridiculous I almost laughed. I'm guessing it also mentioned my ex-boyfriend. Linda nodded. It did. I know exactly where this came from. She asked me to explain, so I walked her through everything. The dinner conversation, Ethan's plan to change his name, the breakup, the lies he'd spread to his co-worker, my sister, my friends, and finally the complaint at work. Then I handed her the folder of screenshots and messages I'd been collecting. She read every page before quietly closing the folder. This isn't a performance issue, she said. It's harassment by an ex-partner. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been until that moment. We're documenting today's meeting, and based on the evidence you've provided, the complaint appears completely unsupported. If anything similar happens again, our legal department will handle it. Before I left, Linda added one final piece of advice. Off the record, change every password you have and speak with a lawyer. It was almost exactly what my landlord had told me. Between my landlord and Linda, the advice was exactly the same. Protect yourself, keep every record you have, and don't assume this will stop on its own. That evening, I changed every password I owned from my email and banking accounts to streaming services and social media. It no longer felt paranoid, it felt necessary. The following day, I met with an attorney named Michael Ross. After listening to my story for less than 15 minutes, he closed his notebook and asked a few simple questions. Has he contacted your employer? Yes. Your family? Yes. Your friends? Several. And has he made false statements about you? More than once. Michael nodded. This isn't an ordinary breakup anymore. It's becoming a pattern of harassment. What do you recommend? A cease and desist letter. If he ignores it, we'll consider stronger legal action. You mean a restraining order? If the harassment continues, yes. Physical threats aren't required when someone repeatedly contacts your employer, your family, and anyone connected to your life while trying to damage your reputation. I sat quietly for a moment before nodding. Let's do it. Together we drafted a formal cease and desist demanding that Ethan immediately stop contacting me, my family, my employer, and anyone else in my life, while also ordering him to stop spreading false allegations. The final line was short but unmistakably clear. Any further harassment may result in legal action. I signed the paperwork, and Michael assured me Ethan would be served at work the following day. By the next afternoon, he called with an update. He got it. How did he take it? The process server said he looked shocked. Since the breakup, someone had interrupted Ethan's version of the story. Part of me hoped that would finally put an end to everything. It didn't. The next morning, An email landed in my inbox with one subject line: "You'll regret this." There was no greeting, no punctuation, just page after page of accusations. According to Ethan, I'd ruined our future, abandoned him, and destroyed his faith in relationships. The further I read, the more unhinged it became. Then I reached the signature. Daniel Carter. I stared at those 2 words. He'd actually done it. What I felt wasn't anger or sadness. It was the unsettling realization that he'd repeated this fantasy so many times he finally believed it himself. I forwarded the email to Michael. His reply was immediate. "Keep it. Don't respond. It's more evidence." I archived the message and tried to move on. After weeks of constant stress, life almost felt normal again. I slept through the night, focused on work, and even had dinner with Emily without checking my phone every few minutes. Then my landlord called. "I need you here for tomorrow's inspection," he said. "Your name is still on the lease." "I haven't lived there for weeks." "I know, but after everything you've told me, I think you should see the apartment yourself." Something in his voice made my stomach tighten. The next morning, I arrived a few minutes early. Everything outside looked exactly as I remembered, making what waited behind the apartment door even more shocking. The place looked as though someone had spent days taking their anger out on it. Furniture lay broken across the floor, the walls were punched through, cabinets hung from shattered hinges, and glass covered the bathroom sink. I stood there speechless. "What happened?" "I was hoping you could tell me," Mr. Reynolds said quietly. Instead, he photographed every room while I walked through what used to be my home. "When were you last here?" he asked. "The day I collected my things. I was here less than 20 minutes. He nodded. "I believe you." After days of defending myself, hearing someone believe me was unexpectedly reassuring. "I still need the contractors to finish their estimates before I make any final decisions. The repairs will cost thousands. Technically, you're still on the lease, but based on your records and the timeline you've shown me, I don't believe you're responsible." Relief washed over me, though it disappeared an hour later when my phone rang. It was Ethan. "The landlord says I destroyed the apartment," he snapped. I leaned against my car. "Did you?" A long silence followed before he muttered, "Some things got broken." "That's not some things, Ethan. Some things? You punched holes in walls, ripped cabinets apart, and shattered mirrors. You left me. I ended our relationship. You pushed me to this." I sighed. "Ethan, it's Daniel." "Fine, Daniel. You destroyed that apartment. That's on you. You don't understand what I was going through. I understand enough to know none of this is my responsibility. The landlord documented everything," I continued. "He'll probably keep the deposit and may sue." "I know. So deal with him." "My attorney will." He laughed bitterly. "So now you're hiding behind lawyers." "No," I said calmly. "I'm protecting myself." He called me selfish. To my own surprise, I didn't feel angry anymore. The argument no longer had any effect on me. "I'm done with this conversation." "You always run." I ended the call. 2 days later, Michael called with the news I'd been hoping for. "The landlord reviewed all the evidence. He's convinced you moved out before the damage happened, and he's willing to release you from the lease." For the first time in weeks, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I accepted the landlord's offer without hesitation. Losing my half of the security deposit was a small price to pay for cutting the last legal tie between Ethan and me. That afternoon, I signed the paperwork, slipped it into the return envelope, and felt an unexpected sense of relief. I wasn't just ending a lease, I was finally closing the last chapter of our relationship. Several weeks later, Sophie sent me a screenshot of a company directory. Ethan's name had disappeared from the employee directory. The profile had already been updated. There was nothing left to confirm. He was Daniel Carter now. A minute later, my phone rang. I answered before the second ring. "So it's official. Driver's license, bank records, everything. He introduces himself as Daniel now. How are people reacting?" "They're mostly confused. Everyone knows that's your ex-boyfriend's name, and no one's buying the story he's telling." "What story?" "That he changed his name to help you move on from your past." I didn't know how to answer. "Does he actually believe that?" "I think he does." Then her voice grew quieter. "He talks about you constantly. Lunch breaks, meetings, random conversations. He keeps showing people your social media and trying to convince them they misunderstood everything. People at the office are getting tired of it." She paused before continuing. "HR already warned him once because he kept dragging his personal life into work. He ignored them. After we hung up, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. Our relationship had ended the night I walked out. For Ethan, it never had. I was still trying to win an argument that no longer existed. About 3 weeks later, I remembered something Sophie had said about HR documenting everything. On impulse, I texted her. "Did anything ever happen?" I replied almost immediately. "Then I call you." A minute later, my phone rang. "It's over." What happened? He got fired. HR had repeatedly warned him to stop discussing me at work, but instead, he became more obsessed. He argued with coworkers, ignored deadlines, and eventually erupted during another meeting with HR, accusing everyone of conspiring against him because they refused to accept his new identity. Security escorted him out before the day was over. A week later, another letter arrived. The landlord's attorney was suing Ethan for more than $8,500 in property damage and unpaid rent. Thanks to everything I documented, my attorney had already negotiated my release from the lease. My name appeared only once in the paperwork, listed simply as a former tenant. When I thanked Michael, he smiled. You made this easier than you think. You stayed organized, kept your composure, and never retaliated. Those choices mattered. I filed the letter with the rest of my records, hoping I'd never have to open that folder again. The very next afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. This is all your fault. I recognized Ethan's voice immediately. It's Daniel. Fine. What do you want? You ruined my life. No, I replied calmly. You ruined it yourself. He blamed me for leaving, hiring a lawyer, and refusing to come back. I reminded him he had contacted my family, my employer, my friends, and destroyed the apartment. He insisted none of it would have happened if I'd stayed. For the first time since our breakup, I felt nothing. No anger, no guilt, no urge to defend myself. Only relief that I'd walked away when I did. I hope you get the help you need, I said before ending the call. He muttered that I'd regret leaving. I never have. I blocked the number, forwarded the recording to Michael, and received exactly the response I expected. Don't reply. If he contacts you again, we'll move forward with a restraining order. That was the last time I ever heard from him. A month later, I moved into a small studio apartment across town. It wasn't fancy, but every key belonged to me, every decision was mine, and for the first time in months, the silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. When my sister Emily visited, she eventually asked if I ever wondered whether I'd made the wrong decision. I thought about the question for a long time before answering. No, I waited. I wasn't choosing between staying and leaving. I was choosing between accepting reality and pretending everything was normal. She nodded quietly. You don't sound angry anymore. I'm not. After Emily left, I stood by the window for a while, watching the lights come on across the city. For months, I'd searched for an explanation that would make Ethan's choices make sense. It never came. Eventually, I stopped looking. Everything that had once kept me awake at night finally belonged in the past. Walking away wasn't the hardest decision I had ever made. It was the one that gave me my life back.